Welcome to Chicago's Bravest Stories. This episode brought to you by PSP Academy for your CPAT training. Follow us on social media, our Instagram and Facebook page at trainwithpsp.com. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank Paul Ciolino for being on the show. Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Paul.
You're welcome, gentlemen.
For those of you who don't realize, we've already had a trip across the street to the bar, and Paul was kind enough to bring in this tequila straight from Mexico.
I believe Jim Stedman called it jaw lubricant.
Yeah,
so we'll go.
Jim was right.
So we're kind of we're gonna kind of jump into this because we want to get into the book that Paul wrote called "Dead in 6 Minutes." It's the basically the biography of Dr. Stanley Zydlo, and for me reading the book, it was very much I've been a paramedic for a while, and when I got halfway through the book, it was very much like I had opened up the envelope of a 23andMe, seeing where I came from, seeing the things that I do, and opening up that envelope and realizing that I'm basically a child of Dr. Zydlo in doing the work that I do as a paramedic. So first of all, Paul, what made you decide to write this book?
Well, interesting, Vince, because I've written a number of textbooks on investigative subjects, mostly homicides, sexual assault, that sort of thing. But I never wrote a biography. So here's the deal. Writing a biography is not fun. It's very difficult. You're writing about somebody's life, right? And now you're writing about a legend's life, which is even far more complicated than just writing like about me or you or something like that. I met Stan Zydlo probably 1992 in his emergency room. Saved my life. I had anaphylactic shock. I coded twice in an ambulance. Actually, 2 Arlington Heights paramedics saved my life.
Did you know you had an allergy?
No, man. It was from a muscle relaxer.
Oh, okay.
And a chronic bad back for many, many years. I'd play golf, take a muscle relaxer, take the edge off, right? It didn't help, but it would make me be able to function. Took it Easter Sunday morning. Boom. Started itching, scratching. My then wife goes, there's probably some soap in your robe or something. Why don't you go take a shower? I go in the bathroom and I look in the mirror. My eyes are blood red. My hands are swelling up. And I'm like, I'm not in any discomfort or pain. But I'm like,
something's not right.
This is bad. I don't know what's wrong. So I walk out there, got a pair of sweats. I said, hey, I'm going to pull the car to the garage. Take me to the ER because there's something drastically wrong going on here. And she looks at me and goes, oh, okay. I pull the car out of the garage. By the time I pull the car out of the garage, I knew I was in big trouble because I was losing my vision. And I get myself into the passenger seat, and I said to her, get me to the hospital right now. Still not in discomfort. So we drive about 3 blocks. We're living in Arlington Heights at the time. We get to a red light, and there's a police officer in front of us. I said, tell that cop to escort us because I'm in trouble right now. And what it feels like is light switch being turned off slowly. And it's getting dimmer and dimmer and dimmer. And I'm not in any discomfort still.
Wow. Yeah.
The cop walks back to the car and looks at me and goes, I'm calling the ambulance. Don't go nowhere. So these 2 paramedics show up Easter Sunday morning. I get a break because that morning one of the church's furnaces took a crap and about 30 people got poisoned from carbon monoxide. All the paramedics are there except these 2 guys. They show up. It took them 40 minutes to stabilize me. I kept coding. And I could hear everything going on.
So you actually went into an arrest from your
twice.
allergy. No shit.
Twice, right? And I could feel the last thing I consciously remember really is them grabbing me and pulling me out of the car. I couldn't move, right?
That was great.
And the lights are being turned off, but I could hear, right? And they got me in the back of the ambulance, and I'm laying there, and I could feel I'm being tussled, but I can't really feel what they're doing. And they're on the phone with this doctor. And, 10, 15 minutes into it, this doctor screaming, and he says, if you don't get an IV started, he's a dead man. And he's dropping the F-bomb, and I'm like, this dude is nuts, right? So...
And what year is this again, Paul?
About 92.
92.
So I get to the hospital, and this guy meets me in the parking lot, and jumps on top of me. He's doing CPR on me. I can hear it all. I'm not at this point. I can't see anything. And my wife walks in there with me, and the doctor says to her, "Does he have kids?" She goes, "Yeah." He said, "You better go get him because I don't think he's going to make it." So he pumps 12 liters of IV into me. He works on me for like 10 hours in the ER. And next thing I know, I come to in the ICU. It's about 6 o'clock the next morning, right? And I'm laying there, and I wake up, and I look around. I know I'm in the ICU because I've been up there in that hospital, Northwest Community Hospital, Arlington Heights. And there's a little dude sitting next to me in a white jacket, bald, and he's writing in the light from the hallway. And I go, "Hey, Doc, how you doing?" I don't know who he is. I know he's a doctor. And he goes, "F me, you fat bastard. You almost wrecked my emergency room. You're lucky I was working. You'd be a dead man if I wasn't on." That's my introduction to Stan Zydlo, right? So this is a great story, actually. I'm like, ooh. So I get discharged about 3 days later. One of my guys that worked for me come to pick me up. I'm standing outside the hospital smoking a cigarette. And he walks out, and he just gives me this look, and I, like, drop the cigarette, and he goes, "Hey, fatty, I didn't work on your ass for 12 hours so you could kill yourself with lung cancer. You want?" So this is my introduction to Dr. Stanley Zydlo. So I go back to my office. A few days later, I write the fire chief, a guy named Bruce Roadwall, a letter, and his paramedics, and Zydlo. And I write Zydlo like, "Hey, here's my promise to you. You or your family, anybody ever needs anything, please call me. I'm in debt to you. Thank you, thank you, thank you." I never hear a word from anybody, right? Fast forward about 6 months, I had an office downtown at Jackson and Adams. I used to have a big party every Christmas time. Yeah, big drunken brawl, let's call it what it was. So I invited the doctor months before or weeks before, and the night of the party, I got a call. "Hey, there's a woman on the phone from the hospital." And I'm thinking, I'm sure we paid that bill.
Right.
I take the call. She goes, "Hi, I'm Dr. Zydlo's secretary. Just got your invitation. He wants directions to your office." "Oh, okay. Great." I'm like, "Who's Dr. Zydlo?" Right? I had forgotten her. I'm totally drawing a blank. Yeah. So he shows up.
Dude, that was like 15 beers ago that I had a cardiac arrest.
Yes. I don't yes. And so he shows up, and I'm like, "Hey, did you ever get my letter?" He goes, "I got it today." He goes, "Greatest goddamn letter I ever got in my life. No one ever wrote me a letter like that before." I said, "I wrote it 6 months ago." He goes, "Oh, the mail screwed up at the hospital. What do you want me to do? I'm here, aren't I?" So we become friends. He lives in Inverness. I live in Arlington Heights. We become close, personal, family friends. Our families, our kids. Oh. And that's how I meet Zydlo. And Zydlo has never says a word to me about his background. I know him as the chief of the ER.
Doc who saved your life.
Yeah. Good dude, right? Yeah. City kid, hardcore, tough guy.
Well, before we get to that, let's dive into you for a little bit.
So acclaimed author.
Sure you want to do that? Yes.
Yeah. Let's cover that.
Right. Everyone. I mean, just a lot of respect and I mean, I can't believe we got you here, Paul. Thank you very much.
I can't believe it either, but it's the booze.
As we take a swig. We probably our first acclaimed author.
Our first radio personality.
Our first radio personality. Well, a lot of firsts right here. And I mean, Paul, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Where'd you grow up?
Grew up on the south side, eventually moved to Burbank. So we go there and bounce back and forth to the city for the rest of my life. But I grew up in Burbank, which is on the edge of Chicago, and everybody who grew up in Burbank didn't know they didn't live in Chicago. Rough cut area, tough guys, gangsters, outlaws. Probably 10 people I graduated high school with, or went to high school in my year, wound up in Stateville or Joliet.
Where'd you go to high school?
Revis.
Okay.
Revis High School. Went in the Army when I was 17. 7 years in the Army. I was infantry. Then I was in military police. I should have paid them for all the fun I had. I joined the Army in 1974 because I wanted to go to Vietnam. Army, 7 years. I got married when I was in high school.
What brought you into the service?
Listen, I come from a family of soldiers and veterans. From the time I was a little kid, I didn't want to do anything else. But everybody, and I had an uncle that won the Silver Star in Korea, should have got the Congressional Medal of Honor. I grew up around these people who were not patriotic as we would, they would not be on Fox News today talking about their service records, okay? They just did it. Right. My mother was a soldier. My father was a World War II soldier, a reluctant World War II soldier who got one of eight, youngest of eight, on the south side at 26 and Wentworth. My dad, all eight were born in the bedroom of that house because nobody had money for doctors. First generation Italians, and hated the military with a purple passion. Got drafted, was the only one in the family that served, and never really talked about it. come home with a lot of medals and stuff, and never look back. That's the strong silence. Was the greatest generation in the world, no doubt about it. Those men, were men, and so that was my influence growing up. Plus, I was too stupid to go to college. Frankly, I had no interest in it. Let me tell you, no teacher ever said, "Hey, ACTs or SATs are next week" to me. They usually said, "Hey, your parole officer was here looking for you last week," or Detective so-and-so's trying to run you down.
You got Saturday detention. So,
detention. I was the king of detention. I never went, so they kept giving me more. What are they going to do to me, right?
Nothing.
So I joined the Army and it saved my life, frankly, guys.
So how did we get from there to you being on television and radio? How was that transition?
Other than being charming, good-looking, smart, worldly sort of bastard I am.
I was actually just going to
a lot of luck.
in my notes.
did you have that highlighted, Corey?
I did.
Right.
Corey's got a lot of orange on his stuff. It's a piece of. Oh, okay. I started early in my investigative career. I had a very high-profile case. A woman on the south side of Chicago was accused of molesting a number of children in her daycare center. It was total BS. Never happened. Promoted it, indicted her, and tried to put her in prison for 20 years. And I went to work for her. I had left Children and Family Services, where I ran the child homicide unit and the mass molestation unit, and I got a call from a private attorney. And I looked at this case and thought, well, it's as good a time as any to leave. And I went to work for her defense attorneys, who I wound up firing, getting her other lawyers throughout the case. But she was found not guilty of all counts. And it was a very high-profile case dealing with the media, where I'm just trying to get her story out because this is critical that people know she didn't do this.
Right.
And you knew she was innocent right from the get-go.
Without question. Couldn't have happened. And it was all BS, made up by the state. And so I started. It was a big, high-profile case, and I never mention her name publicly because I don't want anyone to be bothering her grandchildren at this point. And I'm still very close with her and her husband. She used to babysit my kids as I worked for her. Her husband's one of my dearest friends to this day. I gave the speech at their 50th wedding anniversary. She's a dear friend, and so I don't mention her name, but anyone who was around Chicago in the mid-'80s knows the story.
But that kind of got you.
This got me
little
semi-famous with media people.
Yeah.
As a straight shooter and a guy that doesn't BS. So I got a guilty client. I'm not going to talk to you about it. My client's innocent. I'll talk to you whenever you talk to me. I'll talk to you in the car. I'll talk to you when you're sitting on the shitter. I don't care. I want the story to get out because people understand when they get in trouble and they're indicted and they're innocent, they better get their story out because the government is out there standing in front of the flag and waving and talking about what a scumbag scoundrel you are. That led me to some national stuff. That led me to work for 48 Hours in CBS News, which really, but before that, I was like a talking head on Fox all the time, or CBS or NBC, or
kind of like an expert witness on certain.
Yeah, they're calling me for any time anyone got shot. But what people don't know is you don't get paid for that stuff. So it's a big pain in the ass. You got to go down to the studio. You got to put on a tie. You got to look good. And what I love, I do Greta Van Sustren's show for when she was on CNN and then Fox eventually, and they got 8 other idiots on there talking and yelling over you. It's ridiculous. Man. So finally, I got paid for doing that sort of thing. And when they pay you, they're much more respectful and nicer to you, right?
And this was after some time in child.
Oh yeah,
services.
this is going on years and years, right? And so I went to work for 48 Hours in CBS News. Greatest experience of my life. I got paid a lot of money. There was no pressure. Nobody going to prison. So I give my opinion.
Where were you in your career when you decided to write this book? Or
well, my career was well established at that point. Okay. And
so you had already had some notoriety.
I had a lot of notoriety, but both good and bad.
So this is more a passion project for you.
This was a passion project, and I'm going to tell you why. I used to always tell Stan once I learned his story of creating the paramedic system from the ground up, the first one ever anywhere in the world. Okay. I used to say to Stan all the time, Stan, write a book. This is a story that needs to be told. If nothing else, for a historical perspective, for paramedics and EMTs. And this is critical stuff to your history. This is
we're not taught the history.
No, you're not.
We're taught that we were formed from the Department of Transportation.
Yeah,
that's our history.
It's horse shit
that we're taught in paramedics.
And then now years later, we're still told, well, this is a very young profession. It's a very young profession. They keep repeating that over and over again. Well, at what point is it not going to be a very young profession?
I mean, if you think about the fact that prior to Dr. Zydlo's work, I think Jimmy O'Connell had alluded to this when he was on. If you were sick or you were injured, if you were in the house, you had to be brought out or you had to be taken by a family member.
Right.
They
Absolutely.
would not go in the house.
Yes. Listen, prior to 1972, okay, in this country, in the world, if you got sick or you took a shit and you had a heart attack on the toilet, boy, your husband, wife, son-in-law, whoever, better be able to pile your ass in the car and drive you to the emergency room. Then when you got there, you better pray there's a dude working who's not a dermatologist or an eye, ear, nose, and throat guy.
You had very little chance of survival.
I heard a lot of them were dentists.
Funeral directors. That's who the ambulance guys were. That's who picked up the bodies and scraped you off the highway.
Those were those first Cadillacs that came out.
Yes.
They were all funeral directors.
And there's a story about Chicago having Cadillac ambulances before there were paramedics, right? We had 7 of them, I think. And Commissioner Joyce put a guy in charge of the ambulance service who won the Congressional Medal of Honor as a Marine in Okinawa. All right? True badass war hero. And basically, there was no paramedics. There were no medics. They were just, he said, hey, if our guys die in Chicago, they're going to go out in style in a Cadillac station wagon. Right? There was nothing going on. Yeah, that is a direct quote. And that was the extent of medical services in the city of Chicago at that time. So go ahead, Vince.
Yeah, well, Dr. Zydlo, he grew up on the West Side.
Yes, he did.
His father was an alderman, right?
A convicted and jailed in the grandest tradition of aldermen, yes.
For corruption.
Yes.
Okay.
For taking money for a fire
like
test
any Cinderella Chicago story.
Yeah. Well,
he owned a tavern, owned a gin mill on the West Side, and that's where business got conducted back in the day.
Right.
So Dr. Zydlo is vested in this idea that he at this point he hasn't even got the concept of what's going on. So let's go back to he went to the military, correct? And there's some.
Let's go back even further, okay? Because this is an important part of the story. Zydlo grows up on the West Side, rough cut, broke ass family. His dad owns a tavern, but it's a gin mill as big as this room, right? And his mom doesn't work, raising the kids. Zydlo is the smartest guy in the school.
Back when?
Back in the 50s, early 50s, right? He's also the toughest guy in the school. He's a bantamweight who fights like an animal.
Yeah. And
this gets him in a lot of trouble and concerns his mother. Zydlo's dad, absentee father, never around. Stan never had much respect for the old man. His interaction with him was never positive almost. Stan was known as like the neighborhood genius, but also neighborhood tough guy who'd fight at the drop of a hat. Well, fighting is what got his mother's attention because he got in a fight with a Hispanic kid one day, beat him up. This is like when Stan is in 7th or 8th grade.
This is when he got stabbed, right?
Yeah, kid comes to his house and stabs him in the leg. Stan wins the fight again. But the mother says,
that was kind of the final straw.
This is not going to end well.
We got to get him out of here.
I got this smart boy. I don't know what to do with him. So he goes talks to the local Polish grocer, right? And he says, hey, I got my kid out of here because he's a problem child too. So he goes off to Missouri, all right?
The military academy.
To the military school there. And I got to look at the book to think of the name of it, but it was about a 12-hour bus ride at a time. Mexico, Missouri is where it's at. I think it's Missouri Military Academy.
Not where you got the tequila.
No. I was in the real Mexico down there, okay? South of the border.
And this is as he's approaching high school or?
Freshman,
okay.
Right? So it's a boarding school. But he goes down there, and the mother pulls together the money, and he's down there in Mexico, Missouri, and he's picked up the day he gets there by a dude in a horse and wagon. Now, Zydlo's a city kid his whole life. Never seen a horse and wagon. He's like, are you effing kidding me?
Right.
Horse and wagon? But I'll tell you what, he loved every minute of it. And it was a very serious academic school, a lot of discipline, a lot of regimentation. And Zydlo is like, man, this is my kind of place. And he excelled at it. And he becomes, one of the star pupils at this school.
Well, it seemed throughout the book that wherever he went, he always wound up impressing everybody with
rock star.
How smart he actually was.
His
leadership skills, no matter wherever he went.
no one had to teach him the leadership skills, but they refined them at the military academy, at the United States Air Force, at the college he went to, at Loyola Medical School, right? Stan was a sponge who took it all in no matter what it was. And so he goes in military academy, and he always knows he wants to be a doctor, right? Because back then, what? If you're a smart guy, there's two avenues as an American. You go to law school or you go to medical school.
Right.
We all know the smart guys go to medical school, the dummies go to law school, all right? Any doctor will tell you that. You're a lawyer because you're dumber than I am, right? Ask them. So I'm married to a woman who wants to be a doctor but is a lawyer, right? They all want to be doctors, but they go, I don't have them grades. Didn't do good on them M stats or whatever they call them. But Zittel did well on all these tests. And so he winds up going to a college in Missouri, again, that is geared towards getting you into medical school. And
they approached him, correct? Because he was thinking about Stanford. He wanted to go to a prestigious medical school.
Right.
And when Missouri approached him, he's like, really?
Well, here's what happened. He's in high school, and he starts working for a traveling doctor in the area who was the uncle of one of his classmates. And this guy's doing surgeries and all kinds of stuff, and Stan's with him on the weekends, and the guy's got Stan in his surgical suites, and Stan's like, man, I could absolutely do this stuff. And the guy goes, yeah, you can.
Where was that? Was that in Indiana or something like that?
Missouri.
It was still in Missouri?
Still in Missouri, right?
Okay.
So they go, listen, you want to be a doctor, you got to go to this college. It's a pre-med school. And he's thinking he's coming back to Chicago to go to, University of Chicago or Northwestern and chicks again and women. No. He's still in Missouri. But Stan's a smart guy, and he goes, I want to go to medical school. This is where I got to go.
Well,
so he winds up there.
Dr. Zydlo said that he was the best doctor that he ever met.
Now, this was the guy he eventually worked for his first private practice when he went to Indiana.
That's the guy from Indiana.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And that's got to train Stan.
Okay.
Right? And you remember when Stan started out, there's no such thing as emergency room medicine. Didn't exist.
Right.
No specialty. Stan is one of the 3 original doctors who wrote up the test for emergency room medicine specialists, doctors. He's on the ground floor. He, in fact, doesn't get board certified as an ER doc for several years because he wrote the test. And he said, well, you can't take the test because you wrote it.
Right.
You got to wait till we refine it again, and then you could take it.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. This is where we go back. This is where other doctors moonlighted in the ER.
Yeah,
correct?
the ERs basically were hospitals had no idea what to do with ERs. They knew they had to have one, and people got caught, and they broke their arm or leg, and they wanted to see a doctor. Right? This is the day. Anybody alive today has no idea what ER. There was no ER room to speak of. There were hospitals that had a place in the alley where you could go, like if you were really screwed up.
Okay.
Right?
There was no such thing as a trauma center or stroke center.
No, trauma. The word trauma didn't even exist at that point, except maybe in medical books, right? But so back then, and we're talking 50s, 60s, early 70s, right? There's no such thing.
Right.
Doesn't exist till Zydlo shows up, right?
Well, before we get too far, I want to make sure that we don't pass up one of the things that I think was the most important part of this book.
I keep drinking this tequila. I'm going to pass up.
Well,
please tell me.
I had to duck out.
Yeah.
So you wrote in the book at one point, Dr. Zydlo's back in Chicago. He's standing there. He has his scrubs on. He looks like a doctor.
This is a critical
And
moment.
a police officer on a 3-wheeled motorcycle pulls up and says something like, hey, Doc, we have a hot one over here.
Hop on.
Go. And he hops on the back of this motorcycle.
And this is December 2nd.
Wait, hold on a second, Vince. Is this the inception?
This is, well,
Of the
you
bike team?
no. So
Vince has a passion.
I have
a passion for the
I do have a passion.
CFD bike team.
But this is 1958, right?
Yep.
December
2nd.
December 2nd, 1958. So keep that date in your mind as we're going with the rest of the story.
Oh.
So the doctor's like, we have a real hot one here. He puts him on the back of this motorcycle.
The cop
They
says this is
drive
illegal.
to Our Lady of Angels.
And what's happening at Our Lady of Angels on December 2nd?
One of the most historical
And this is
fires
this is being
in the
witnessed.
United States of America.
Firefighting
The
operations
deadliest
of-
school fire in the United States of America.
So
Still, to
92
this day.
children, 3 nuns, if I recall. And Dr. Zydlo standing there, and he's watching people being put into the back of police vans and being driven
Well,
off.
listen, Zydlo is a medical school student at Loyola. He's coming home from school, parking in front of his house on the west side with a 3-wheel motorcycle cop. He's wearing his doctor jacket, right? Now, the cop don't know what's a little doctor schmachter, right? He goes, hey, Doc, hop on. We got a bad one. Zittel like, okay. He has no idea where he's going.
And it's December. That's all he's wearing.
That's it.
Because you wrote it. Said he was freezing his ass off.
Yep. And so Zydlo shows up at the fire. And fellas, anybody listening to this, the Holy Angel Fire is one of the biggest tragedies ever happened in this country, okay? 92 kids get barbecued that day. And by the way, the Catholic Church owes a lot. The biggest problem is lack of fire inspections, safety inspections. These kids get barbecued unnecessarily for the most part. Nuns die. But Zidlo's watching this, and he's watching kids basically being thrown out of second-story windows onto the sidewalk, hitting it like 5 pounds of ham and dying. And Zidlo's job at that point is like telling people, oh, that guy's dead. That guy probably ain't going to make it. But let's get this guy to the hospital right now. He's a medical school student, right?
And these are children.
These are 7th and 8th graders.
When you research the Our Lady of Angels Fire, the whole neighborhood came out.
Well, yeah. People were bringing ladders out there.
Their own ladders from their own garages.
Listen, the fire department had no idea. Number one, wrong address gets called in initially.
Correct.
Right? They go to the wrong side of the school and church. By the time they get there, the place is fully ablaze, smoke inhalation. One of the nuns said to the kids, stay in your seats. We're going to pray our way out of it. Every kid in that classroom got killed. This is how tragic this was. Chicago was collectively hit in the head with a sledgehammer and never recovered from this fire. And Zydlo, though, as a medical person, said, this is bullshit. I can't ever let this happen. I got to do something. This is crazy.
This is before he's a doctor.
Right. This is before he's a doctor. Before he knows what his specialty is going to be, what he's going to do for a living.
Right.
He's just like watching this. And
he has his battle of the bulge right here.
He has his battle of the bulge moment, man. And he is like, this is unacceptable. This is crazy. Because there's no medical help. There are no paramedics, no EMTs. Skin's falling off kids. They're hitting the sidewalk, dying of head injuries, etc. It is horror of horrors. And every Chicago fireman that worked that case had PTSD afterwards. Some of them never recovered from it. It was that horrendous. And that's saying something for Chicago firemen back in those days because they had seen it all. But no one ever seen anything like this, ever. And it left an impression beyond words on everybody there, especially Zydlo, who was only doctor there.
Yeah.
Only medical professional of any type.
Right. And one of the most famous fire scene photographs in the history of the American Fire Service was taken that day.
It's in the book, fellas.
Oh, yeah. And we put that up there on the anniversary of the Our Lady Angels.
By the way, there's a phenomenal website put up by the survivors of the Our Ladies of Angel Fire. And they did a great job with it, documenting who was there, who died, what happened, amazing stuff. In fact, there's a young girl in the school named Ciolino, no relative of mine. I learned that after I researched this whole subject. But this stung Stan. Stan was like, this is BS, man. This cannot happen again. Mm. And that is really, that day is the birth of the paramedic in the EMT.
Right, you can really trace the birth of paramedicine back to that day.
Yes.
Which is something we've talked on this podcast in some form or fashion, pretty much in every podcast that we've done so far. That subject has come up. So here we are again talking about it with the birth of paramedicine.
Right.
That we don't even, at this point, we still don't know that it's coming yet.
It's also it's the birth of a lot of things. Responses, how the fire department responds, the Fire Prevention Bureau.
Yeah, I mean,
all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. A lot came out of the tragedy. So let's go to he graduates med school.
Right, Loyola.
Okay,
a Loyola graduate.
And is that when he goes to Indiana and starts
goes in? And now you remember he gets married in college, and he marries this girl, and he has 4 or 5 children with her, and moves to Indiana. Stan, who hated anything but
you got 4 or 5
bright
kids,
lights,
where else are you gonna move?
Right? Winds up always in these country ass places, right? And he's like, man, back in Indiana. But he meets this doctor there who he goes to work for, who Stan describes the most brilliant medical professional he ever met in his life. And this guy's doing neurosurgery, open heart surgery, appendicitis, broken legs, whatever. This is where Stan's getting his real hardcore training. And
all out of a strip mall in Indiana.
Bum F Indiana, right? And I mean, they're country doctors, basically. There are no medical specialties at this point. And this, when it became medical specialties, this doc said, Stan, I'm going to become a radiologist because I'm tired of working my ass off. This is all yours.
Right.
That's what happens.
He basically leaves.
Yes.
And was like,
he says, Stan,
it's all yours.
Take it, babe. I'm done. I'm done billing. I'm done. I'm getting paid by a hospital to be a radiologist.
So the Stan, who's like the person, was very, from all accounts in your book, like just a really like in your face, like he wouldn't take no for an answer, like basically like a really bulldog type of a guy. That
listen, Stan
you didn't mess with him.
He's 5'9", 130 pounds, soaking wet, right? He is a tough guy from the west side of Chicago, Golden Glove boxer, and he does not suffer fools, fellas, all right? He does not. Stupid people did not work for him, whether they had a medical degree or a GED or not. And he's one of these guys who judged you instantly, knew whether you had it or didn't have it, and he didn't waste no time with you. He was done with you quick. And if he liked you, and if he thought you had potential, he was your mentor for life.
One of the things, and it's kind of out of sequence, because you kind of start, and then you in the middle of the book, you kind of go into his military background.
Right.
And what I found interesting, that when he went to the Air Force, he did top secret stuff.
Right.
He flew missions over the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
How does he make his way back to Chicago?
There was an opening for an emergency room doctor at Northwest Community Hospital in Arlington Heights. And by that point, it was run by a private agency, a private corporation. And they hired Stan to come and work in the emergency room. And Stan is like, yeah, I could do that job. That's easy peasy. Let me at it. And he shows up in Arlington Heights, close enough to Chicago for him.
Right.
And basically, in quick order, becomes the chief of emergency room medicine. And this is where the paramedics come in, basically. There's a witch lady out in Inverness, next door neighbor, 40-something-year-old guy, drops dead of a heart attack in his living room. Palatine Fire Department shows up. They're all standing there looking at him. Nobody's trained. They just like waiting for
There's not even an EMT program at this point.
There's nothing, man. There's no EMTs. There's no paramedics.
And all of the chiefs and all the fire department, these are the old school, the
Right.
old guard
Smoke eaters,
fire
babe,
departments.
right?
There is no EMS. It's all
EMS.
firefighting.
They don't even know what EMS is. They've never heard of the phrase, okay? They're all old smoke eaters. We fight fires. We put out fires. We take cats out of trees. We don't do none of that medical garbage stuff, okay? That's not our job. We don't do that. Nobody does it. It's nobody's job. So anyways, this woman in Inverness comes up to Northwest Community Hospital going, listen, this is crazy. People are dying in their homes. You guys don't do anything. And the head of a hospital says, listen, you need to talk to this guy named Stan Zydlo, who's as pissed off as you are about nobody doing anything. And she goes and sees him, and Stan says, listen, I can train people to save lives, but hey, nobody's paying me to do it. Nobody's interested in doing it. And it's against the law because...
Well, prior to 1972,
there you go, boy.
You had to be a doctor or a nurse in order to even touch a patient outside of the hospital.
Boy.
And if you didn't, you could be charged and you could be arrested.
And let me tell you something. The doctors and nurses love that. Okay? They were very happy with that rule. So
They wish they had that rule today.
Well, let me tell you, back in pre-1972, they would try to get your ass prosecuted if you did anything medically to anyone outside of a hospital. All right, that's our bailiwick. Don't go over there. Don't touch it.
They were very protective of owning that space.
Well, and even
the
worse,
nursing industry to this day is very protective of everything.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked to other people in different medical systems, even different states, and the notion of a medical system with different fire departments. Obviously the city has their own medical system, but different suburban fire departments and different suburban hospitals have these medical systems. And to this day, there's generally not a paramedic EMS coordinator. Every time you look at a hospital EMS coordinator,
Look at the state.
At the state level, too.
At the state level?
Right.
Yeah.
You can't even apply for Illinois Department of Public Health or any other state, I imagine, Department of Public Health EMS position unless you have a minimum of a nurse BSN, which is, again, not their area of speciality.
You let him talk like this uninterrupted all the time? Because
all the time.
I'm the star of this show, okay? This is like a
right,
minute of...
yeah.
And let me tell you, he's got the voice, right? He's got the pipes. I mean, I'm listening to him going, I don't know when to listen to my ass after that, right?
Well, he starts talking and I get all
He's like a
hypnotized.
professional,
it's
man.
like, and it's
sucks
just,
me in.
You would expect
It's
for
such
him. You would
bullshit.
expect for him to be a beautiful man.
and you would expect it for there
Yeah,
to be
he's
some
got a-
actual information
Right.
of what I'm talking
I
about.
wouldn't
he's
be
got
a
a-
man sitting at this table.
I didn't understand a word he
Definitely
said.
has
but I was
a
drawn in.
a face for radio. That's for sure.
Where's this tequila? All right. It's,
So this woman
Yeah.
approaches Stan.
You remember her name? Because I don't right now.
you know
after,
what?
8 shots of tequila and 6 beers.
That's funny. I was
Better
gonna,
look that
I was
shit
gonna
up
ask
right
you.
now. Yeah, yeah. She's a rock star in
Yeah,
this
well,
whole thing.
she was the woman who, because he had the first step he had to do was change the law.
Well, listen. Here. He tells her, "Hey, I could train anybody to do this stuff. Okay, in spite of what other people are telling you, this is not rocket science." And Stan used to say it all the time. You got to make sure they're breathing. You got to make sure they don't bleed to death, and you got to make sure they're getting air. Okay, and if we cover those 3 things, we're going to save a lot of lives. That was his attitude. And he said, "I could teach a chimpanzee to do that stuff." So she shows up, and he says to her, "Listen, I'll train them. I'll do everything we got to do. But I'm not dealing with these idiot politicians. I don't want nothing to do with them." So this woman goes, she's rich. Her husband's wealthy. They live in Inverness. Bro, that is a nice neighborhood out there, okay?
Janet Schweitman.
Schweitman. And Mrs. Schweitman, she's dead now. She died of Alzheimer's, unfortunately. She is one of the unsung heroes in the whole paramedic industry. And she says to Stan, "All right, I'll get it done." And Stan is like, yeah, I've heard that before. But if you do, I'm ready to go.
Well, she fought tooth and nail.
Well, let me tell you. She goes to see Governor Ogilvie, right? And Ogilvie goes, "No, this sounds like a good idea to me." But he says, "You're going to have a problem. And the problem is doctors and nurses. They're not going to like this stuff. You need some political clout." She says, "Who do I talk to?" He says, "Well, go see this guy in Barrington. He's a smart guy. He's savvy, and he's not up for re-election. You go talk to him. Tell him your idea. Maybe he'll write a law for you." So she goes,
He's got
"Okay."
nothing to lose politically.
She goes and sees him, right? And he goes, "You know what? That's a goddamn great idea. I like that." So he says, "But we're going to have problems with doctors and nurses. They're not going to like this stuff." And man, he could not have been more right? So Zydlo's involved in this. She's involved. Zydlo's now talking to community groups and going out, "Hey, listen, people are dying in the streets like dogs because nobody can help them. Nobody's trained to help them. We want to help them. We want to train them. We want to make, we want to save lives, but your government is preventing this from happening." So it's like the word of Stan is starting to get out in the communities. And
what
this
year is this about, Paul?
Huh?
What year is this
This is
about?
probably around 71.
Okay.
Probably around 1970, 71, right? So Zidlo's out talking to people. He's preaching it. He's saying it's not rocket science. You don't have to be a doctor. We could save lives, folks. I could teach you how to do CPR today, and you could save any heart attack victim. But if you don't get to them in 6 minutes, they're gone anyways. He said, we need people that could get to them, who are professional, who are trained, and could get it done.
At this time, there's like Dr. Zittel is basically running 9 fire departments and 2 private ambulances, right? That's who's involved.
That's
in
who
this.
eventually gets involved. So let's fast forward a little bit. Basically,
But
Schweitman
their first fight was changing the law.
Right.
Okay.
So Schweitman, and by the way, doctors came to Zydlo when all the rumor of paramedics, EMTs, an EMS system is brewing. The doctors go to Zydlo and go, "Hey, Stan, don't be messing around with this stuff, okay? We don't like it."
It was not well received by other doctors.
They hated it. The nurses hated it, right?
His peers.
How are you going to teach these stupid firemen? Now the rumor's out. he's going to use fire departments and police department personnel to do this stuff.
Because
How
we
you-
had the 911 systems.
There is no
already.
911 system. You're dialing 0 and then saying to the operator, I'm at 79th and Harlem. Where am I? And she's telling you, well, that would be the bridge. What side of the street you on? That's Bridgeview, Burbank, or Chicago, or Summit. All right. That's how people
that was a
responded.
whole nother hurdle. Was
Right. There's no 911 guys. No 911. There's no paramedics. There's no nothing. So you dial 0 and hope for the best.
Okay.
And generally it was like, anybody there with a car? Yeah, you need to take them to a hospital. That's how it happened. So
What pushed Zydlo to make this a first responder fire department issue?
A lack of anybody else willing to do it. So here's what happens. Mount Prospect, small little suburban town right next to Arlington Heights, between Wheeling and Arlington Heights on Northwest Highway there. The mayor one day is driving by a fatality accident, and he's like watching this guy bleed out in the street. Calls his fire chief, Chief Larry, over there, and he goes, "Hey, you got a guy dying and bleeding." And the chief's like, "What do you want me to do about it? We're fire department. We put out fires." He goes, "Well, can you send somebody over here?" And he goes, "Well, I'll send some guys over." And they go over there, peel the guy off the street. He's dead, of course. And the mayor's hot. And he's like, "Hey, dude, we don't have a lot of fires out here in Mount Prospect. What else you doing?" He goes, "Hey, I'd like to do it, but it's against the law. We can't do it." He goes, "Well, you know what? Go buy yourself a car or a station wagon so you could haul people around." And the chief is like, "Yeah, no problem." And at this point, the chief has had 2 guys going over to Loyola Hospital who are teaching them, they're learning how to be like EMTs, for lack of a better word, because there is no EMTs,
Right.
but advanced first aid
responders,
class.
yeah.
Advanced first aid. So he spends $2,600 or something on a station wagon. They painted fire engine red, put some lights on it, and they start responding to accidents. Well, lo and behold, Zydlo starts talking to the local fire chiefs, and this fire chief is like, "Hey, come train my guys. My mayor is behind it. We're ready to go."
Yeah, they're already doing it.
Well, Zydlo's like, "Hey, I just don't want you guys. I want everybody doing it. We got to have a system, man. We got to, this thing has got to hum. It's got to work.
Get your boys.
Pick some guys who you want trained, and I'll train them up." So as a result of that, let me find it in the book.
Well,
He goes
Dr.
to the
Zydlo would
fire
only
departments.
accept fire personnel and police
Well,
personnel.
let me tell you how that happened. So Zydlo's trying to figure out who am I going to train? How are these people going to respond? They got to be involved in emergency services of some sort. So the fire department, believe me, no fire chief was like, "Yeah, we want to do the CMS and paramedic and EMT stuff." They're like, "Hey, we're firefighters, okay? Give me that sissy shit over here about, medical stuff. We don't do medical. We do life-saving stuff." And Zydlo's like, "You know what, fellas? You're doing less fires now than you've ever done. And guess what? In 20 or 30 years, there aren't going to be any fires. So you better figure out what you're going to be doing." And some of these forward thinking chiefs, Arlington Heights, Buffalo Grove, Hoffman Estates, Mount Prospect, Morton Grove, Palatine, Rolling Meadows, Schaumburg, Lake Zurich, not the fire department, the police department, okay, and 2 private ambulance companies, Delta Ambulance and Arlington Ambulance, 11 agencies. They commit to Zydlo, go, "Yeah, we're in. We think this is a great idea."
All Northwest Side suburban.
All Northwest
Chicago.
suburban city of Chicago's nowhere to be seen. Chicago Fire Department, Mayor Daley, like, "Whoa, a lot of liability there.
were
We
not
don't
on
wanna-
board.
We don't care about saving no lives in Chicago. We got, we're fighting fires. That's what we do."
And these are all suburbs that are
Northwest
surrounding
suburban.
Northwest suburban.
And listen, 1972, a lot of these towns are basically farm towns. They're not even big cities. Now they're Schaumburg. Arlington Heights, biggest suburb in Cook County, right? Them in Evanston,
Close, yeah.
right? Over
Evanston, Joliet,
110,000. Joliet's in Will County, though.
Oh, right.
Right.
Way to go, Corey.
What? Evanston? Big though, right?
Yes.
But these get, no one wants to do this stuff. They're like, so who shows up, man? So Zydlo is like, "Okay, listen, I can teach people how to do this." Now, it's still illegal. Whiteman is still politicking this thing, right? The nurses and the American Medical Association, Illinois State Medical Association, American Nurses Association, they hire lobbyists to kill this thing. Forget it. These stupid firemen are never going to be able to save lives.
Well, they thought it was going to put their jobs in jeopardy.
I don't know what they thought, but it was stupid. And Zydlo is like telling doctors, "You're a moron, okay? Let me explain this to you in a language you understand. If someone comes in the emergency room and they're dead, you don't get paid for anything. If they come in here and they were able to keep them breathing, and I'm able to save their life when they get here finally, you get to treat them for broken bones and concussions and x-rays. In other words, you make a lot of money because we kept this dude alive or dudette, right? Mm-hmm. If they're dead, you don't make nothing. The funeral home gets paid. Well, doctors were like, it's not about the money. He goes, bullshit. It's always about the money. Right. Zydlo got it. And the nurses were like, we're not giving up any of our territory, right?
But at this point, Zittel is still what we call the head doc of the emergency room.
Well, yeah, he is. At this point, he is the chief of emergency room medicine at Northwest Community, right? Okay. So at Northwest Community, you got to love these guys, right? They go, well, doc, great idea. We're supportive, but we really don't. We're not going to pay you while you teach these guys.
Right. They wanted to put him on a leave of absence.
They didn't put him on a leave of absence.
They said, you can go teach paramedics.
Yeah, at the firehouse.
But you're going to go on a leave of absence.
You're not teaching them here.
They wouldn't pay him.
Right. And Zydlo, right, he's like, now he's got new babies, new kids, right? Got another family. He's got 9 kids all together, child support, alimony, right? Zydlo's like, dude, are you kidding me? I got to make money here. I'm willing to do this. I'm willing to do it on my own time, but I got to make some dough. I'm like, hey, doc, I'd like to help you, but, sorry. Zydlo does it. It starts with 217 firemen and a couple cops and some private ambulance guys. $25 fee. The school, that's to learn everything, fellas. $25, okay?
Would that cost us, Corey?
Oh, God.
Right now, the cost of paramedic school is right around $5,000. And it was 234 hours back then. 234. And it cost you $25.
The sole licensing authority in the world was Dr. Stanley M. Zydlo Jr. He decided whether you passed and whether you got a license. And he was the licensing authority and the final authority on everything paramedic. There was no state agencies. There were no laws. He was the man. And
throughout the state, throughout the
country. That's it. We were the only ones.
This was the only game in the country.
Right. Now, let's dispel the fairy tales, okay? There were a few cities, Cincinnati,
Seattle,
Pittsburgh, Seattle, Los Angeles. They were kicking around this whole paramedic thing. Mm-hmm. But nothing organized, no central EMS system, no multiple jurisdiction, multiple cities reporting the same thing, no doctor at the top, no standardized training, nothing like that. Shit. It was like in Cincinnati, they were
isolated incidents.
They would send heart surgeons out with an ambulance on heart attack calls only.
Yeah.
Okay? So, if it's a heart case, we go. If it's not a heart case, bring them in, right? Well, so Zydlo is like, and we're going to deal with everything, and we're going to deal with it right here. That's how it's going to work, right? And he takes these firemen who were largely veterans, lunatics, lucky to have a high school diploma, never mind college.
They were all men.
All men.
They were all men.
No chicks in this game, fella. There were no women firemen.
90% of them were all veterans.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
veterans of Vietnam?
Military.
Right.
But a lot of Vietnam veterans,
okay.
Right? This is early 70s, 60s were hot. We quit sending guys to Vietnam in 74.
Okay.
So a lot of guys were Korean Vietnam veterans.
Okay.
Right? And they're firemen. And they're like, I don't want to do this sissy medical stuff, man. Are you kidding me? But he takes guys, who had no interest, basically zero interest in doing this job, and trains them up. That's what the genius of Stan Zydlo.
That's amazing.
Yeah. He takes these guys and goes, it's my way or the highway, girls. You don't like it? Hit the door. You don't have to be here. So they start with 217. He graduates 107 as paramedics eventually. Yeah, and those are the guy that hits the street. On what date, Vince? You read the book, actually.
I did.
December 2nd, 1972.
December 2nd, yeah.
Which is what? The anniversary
of Our Lady.
Of Our Lady tragedy.
Well, 186 took the test, and 107 passed.
Yeah.
That 107 now represented all of the paramedics across the country at this point.
That's it. That's the only game in town, guys. 107 northwest suburbs of Chicago.
But here's where, like, some people argue with who was the first, because in 1970, the Wadsworth-Townsend Act now allowed paramedics to work on patients pre-hospital.
Right. Where at?
What do you mean?
What state?
Ugh.
You didn't read the book hard enough, did you?
I think California, actually. Okay.
Was it California?
Yeah.
Well, but they just, from what I read, that just enacted the act, but there was no medical system.
There was no
around. They just said, okay, yeah,
right.
You
so
want
just the litigation around.
It was
them
just
making
the
it
act
not-
to allow them, but nothing had been put in place
no
up
protocol,
until this point. There
no
was nothing.
textbooks,
Right.
no
system.
curriculum.
There was
Right.
pre-hospital stuff, but no EMS system.
Right.
And that's what Dr. Zydlo kind of created, was EMS proper. Like, there was a doctor on the top. They trained to his level. This is the protocols, and so on and so forth. There was nothing like that until Dr. Zydlo put that in place. And one of the stories in the book that really got the attention of these 186 guys that sat down to take this paramedic test was the first day that they showed up for paramedic school. He hangs an IV bag, hooks it up, grabs a needle, pokes himself in the hand, and says, tomorrow, guess what you're all doing? You're all starting IVs on each other. And they're all like, is this guy fucking nuts?
That's right. They go like, F you, man. And he said, and if you don't want to do it,
right, hit
let
the road.
your ass hit that front
They were
door.
like, hit the road. And he's like, if you don't want to be standing in a pool of blood with your elbows up in guts, you can leave too. And he kind of just put it, this was one of the, it's my way or the highway type attitudes that is prevalent throughout this book.
Yeah.
And today, what's one of the first big things when you're in paramedic school that you do? You sit around and you stick each other with IVs.
Well, and it's funny because he said in the book that he stuck himself in the hand, and then he said, you're all going to start IVs in each other's hand, which is ironic because that's exactly what I did. I mean, you went to Malcolm too, right?
Yes.
And
so did Corey.
when we sat down, like, we weren't doing ACs on each other. We were doing hands.
Yes.
So I thought back and I'm like, God damn, that's where that came from, you know? And without knowing it, that's where that came from. So the statistics in the book is that, so we started with the first class of 107 paramedics, and in 2012, there were 14,000 registered paramedics. And I think you estimated there was going to be another 55,000.
That's the national statistics, right?
Yeah.
And we know paramedics are way advanced beyond EMT. There's hundreds of thousands of EMTs, 8-week course basically, right?
Yeah.
Most basic military courses are 8 weeks for medics and stuff. And the combat medics was doing this stuff since the Civil War.
Right. Well, they were pushing
Right?
stuff like albumin
Yeah.
to,
Percanamide.
casualties.
Well, they were doing amputations, field amputations. I mean, a combat medic could do pretty much everything, but they would come home and there was no profession or occupation for them, right?
Right.
They
There's
become a
no
nurse
lateral move
or
for
go to
them.
medical school.
Right.
That was their
What could you
and
do
again,
with
they
that
were-
skill set in the
Right.
private sector? Nothing.
nothing.
Right.
No,
Yeah.
there was no private sector.
Yeah.
There was in a public
They would
sector
take their
either,
skills
right?
and they would start from the bottom just like any
Right.
other 18-year-old kid that was going to school.
Like, man, dude,
Thanks for serving your country.
Right.
Here's how you drive a forklift.
I've been saving lives for 13 months in the jungles of Vietnam. Guys with limbs blown off, no throat. I had to figure out how to get them to breathe. And these guys had nowhere to go. They were done, cooked.
Well, you brought that up too, and so we'll save that for later. But so Ted Loesch was one of the Zydlo paramedic,
Right.
And you talk about that some of these fire chiefs really gave a lot of resistance to EMS, and when Ted Loesch saved Chief Fogarty.
Yeah. Well, Rolling Meadows is a great example.
He said that he did not want these paramedics to do CPR because he didn't want to break the ribs of his citizens.
Oh, it was worse. He didn't want them to see their citizens, their female citizens, bras.
Okay.
By the way, back in '72, them bras weren't that hot, anyways.
But that
chief
was the
probably-
concern, and,
right? Oh yeah,
and
yeah.
for Dr. Zittel, he's like,
"Are you kidding me?
this
Right.
is the matter of life and death with your modesty."
Rolling Meadows is a great point to talk about because the chief out there, the fire chief, was totally uninterested in participating.
Right.
For you who's unfamiliar with Chicago geography, Rolling Meadows is next to Arlington Heights, so it's right in that jurisdiction there. Small town right across the street from the racetrack.
Yep.
and the courthouse there. But the chief then was like, man, a fireman don't need to be doing this stuff, right? And Ted Loesch, who is the town barber, becomes a part-time fireman, and he's in the first paramedic class. Zydlo's talking to the trustees in Rolling Meadows, the mayor, and goes, listen, only Zydlo way. You want us to say your granny who has a heart attack, your mom who flops over at the kitchen table at Thanksgiving? We can do it. I don't care if I see their bra. I see a million sets of tits every day, okay? I don't care about their bras. Neither will the firemen. They're not going to care either. They're out there to save lives. And the city council overruled the mayor and the fire chief. They're like, hey, this is a great idea, right? So that's why Rolling Meadows gets involved. And Loesch, who is the barber, becomes a fireman, becomes one of the first paramedics, is the chief a year later. Winds up being the chief. He was forward-thinking, smart guy. Wound about being a chief for like 30 years out there. And Loesch is a...
Well, you wrote about the little controversy when... So Chief Fogarty at the time has a heart attack.
Yeah, has a heart attack about 9 months into the program, right?
They save him.
Bad heart attack.
Yeah.
Like he's down, man. He takes a bad one, and he goes down.
And he's saved by the paramedics.
And the newly trained Zydlo paramedics, 3 of them, Loesch, 1 of them, show up and save his ass. And he's never the same after that, man. He's in bad shape, right? Yeah. But they save his life. And now he's a true believer.
Right.
Whoa, I like this paramedic thing all of a sudden.
You kind of alluded to the fact that he said, oh, I was on board with this from the beginning.
Which was
after he was saved.
Total horse crap.
Yeah.
Okay. He got on board after they saved his ass. And he was one of the early saves in the program. And that's just the work that these initial paramedics did, man. I can't express this enough, right? Because the only support they got is their chiefs, limited. They're not even sure. Their city governments and mayors, town president, whatever, they sort of think it might be a good idea. Of course, everybody's worried about getting sued, right?
Yeah.
And the only true believer, Stan Zydlo.
Yeah.
Who's sitting there at Northwest Community Hospital running the whole show, like, for lack of a better word, it's my way or the highway. You're gone, done. If I don't like you, you're not doing this job.
Thanks for listening, everybody. This concludes the podcast for this week. Part 1 of Paul Ciolino's podcast about his book, Dead in 6 Minutes. Next week, we will finish up the podcast, talk about the end of the book, the history of the paramedic program in the state of Illinois, and we're going to talk about Paul's career for a bit. Thanks.
Find us on Facebook and Instagram. You can download this episode on iTunes, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Stitcher, YouTube, and TuneIn. Thanks for joining us. Hey guys, if you're a first responder or you know a first responder that has a story to tell, we'd love to hear it. Please reach out to us at Chicago's Bravest Stories on Facebook or Instagram.
We'd also like to thank the Missing Chums for their musical contribution to the podcast with the song Yes You May.
Hey everybody, it's Steve here. I'd like to talk to you about another awesome company that helps bring the podcast to you free of charge. Chicagoland CPR. It's a first responder owned and operated CPR company. As a first responder myself, I can't express to you enough how important CPR training is for everybody in the community. They offer real customizable world-class education for all their clients. They have a combined 30 plus years of field experience as fire service and EMS educators throughout the Chicagoland area. Chicagoland CPR is extremely focused on providing real-world, no-fluff education, and the main focus is on organization, an engaged classroom, working with students to completely understand the material, getting your certificates out on time, and most importantly, coming to your facility. They offer a wide variety of American Heart Association classes, CPR, First Aid, AED, ACLS, PALS, and a full complement of StarGuard Elite, Lifeguard, and aquatic safety classes. Our clients include nursing homes, hospitals, long-term care facilities, fire departments, schools, park districts, coaching staff, and many other groups throughout the communities. If you're interested in hosting a class at your facility for your employees, or you have any questions about services and pricing, contact Chicagoland CPR. You can find them on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, the World Wide Web. I can't express to you, again, how important CPR and first aid training is. They want to hear from you soon. Give them a call, find them. Let's set you up a class to help save some lives.
Also sponsored by Chicagoland Event Medical Services, we are a first responder owned and operated first aid and emergency medical service provider. Our mission is to protect the lives and well-being of event patrons all over the state of Illinois by providing professional and experienced career EMS practitioners in an event setting. Our services are completely customizable to the needs of our customers. Our business was born out of a necessity to provide competent health care providers to both large and small events. We do this by bringing firefighters, paramedics, EMTs, nurses, lifeguards, first aid tents. We also customize your own site safety and emergency response plan, and that information will always be available to your staff. We pride ourselves on providing the best patient care possible to your events.